Hey everybody, welcome back to another stream. Today we're going to be looking at something that I think is pretty dang cool. And that is the Wii HDMI mod that I've been working on. So let's get you zoomed in a little bit here. See what we're talking about here. So if you're on the Shmups forum, you might have seen the earlier version of this mod before. If you've been on my website and ever read my blog posts about what I'm working on, you will have seen the earlier version of this one before. Let's see, the old version looks like this. Very similar to the new version, but with some pretty significant and important changes. What this is it's an HDMI mod kit for the Wii, specifically for Wii motherboard revisions after the RVL CPU-40. So RVL CPU-40, -50, -60, and RVK CPU-01 and CPU-02 Wiis are all supported on this one. What it does is, like I said, it adds HDMI output to your Wii, which is cool. It's a GC Video product, so it was based on the same basic design, like firmware and everything, as all the GameCube HDMI out mods. This was heavily inspired by the Wii Dual mod by Citrus 3000 PSI, or Dan at Black Dog Technology. Form factor wise, it was inspired by that. I wanted to fit it into a package that worked well in the Wii, and I think I've achieved that. This package here fits perfectly inside of this motherboard revision, and the way it works is there's a few different boards here, and basically on the Wii, this right here is the AVE RVL chip, which is the video DAC for the Wii. So it takes the digital video out from the GPU and converts it into analog signal that goes out to the AV port. What this does is it sits right here, right in this spot here, gets soldered in place, and then we solder wires over to AV RVL chip, and we pull digital video out of the Wii, convert it into an HDMI compliant signal, and then it connects with a ribbon cable like this right here, and goes over to this board here, which contains an HDMI port and gives you HDMI out. This third board is the actual new feature of this new version of this mod. It sits right over here, and it contains an infrared receiver and a button. And the features that adds is that you can control the menu with an infrared remote. Normally, you would control the menus with a GameCube controller, but some of those newer Wiis, the RVK Wiis, don't have GameCube controller ports, so you can't. The old design, you couldn't control it at all if you didn't have GameCube ports. This design, you can control it with an infrared remote. So that's the main new feature for this version of the mod. And that's about it. What we're going to do today is install it on this Wii here, and show off the new mod working. I've left links down in the description of this video showing where you can go to purchase the boards. They're freely available. It's an open source project, so you can purchase the boards, build it yourself if you choose to. Or I do intend to sell it on my website as well as a complete kit, with installation service as an option. So if you're not savvy with doing your own installations, I can take care of it for you. So let's go ahead and get this mod going here. So let me pop this out of the vise here for a second. Okay, so there's going to be some soldering happening here, and it's very fine pitch soldering. It's not it's not for the faint of heart. If you're not very confident in your soldering skills, then this may not be the mod for you. Just be straightforward about that. Like I said, I do fully intend to offer modding services. So on this, with doing these installations. So if you need it, then I would be happy to provide it. This is a pretty advanced mod. It's a little bit of a time-consuming mod, so it may. I haven't set what the pricing is going to be just yet, but soon that will be figured out. Okay, so first of all, the way that this board is laid out, when you put it in place, you have all these nice little pads down here, and those all get soldered to this AVE RLV or RVL chip, rather. And so you got to run 13 little wires from here to this board here. So we start by soldering all the wires onto the board. Onto the AVE RVL chip. And we're going to first get a little bit of solder, a little bit of solder onto our tip here, just a tiny little bit. We're going to go through and we're going to tin each of those legs that we're going to be soldering to. So that's that first one on the end there. That's going to be our first wire. Then we have these 3 wires here. And you know what? Got a little bit too much solder on there, so it's kind of, we're just going to go ahead and tin everything. We're going to drag that solder over and tin everything. Might as well. Try to get that solder off of there. And we are going to use some solder flux because, whoops, what I meant to say was desolder and braid, because, or solder wick if you will, because unlike Voltar, I guess we are not soldering like champions here. Okay, so that short's cleared. Let's go ahead and get in here and tin these here as well. Oh goodness, it happened again. Well, I guess we don't have to be champions. Alright, so now that those are all nice and tinned, we can go ahead and start soldering some wires. Okay, got my pinout up on the computer screen. So I'm using some 30 gauge wire. This is pretty fine, pretty good for this application. And what I'm going to do is just pre-tin the wire, and we're not even going to strip the insulation off. We're just going to apply a little bit of heat, because this is vinyl insulated wire. You might try using solderable magnet wire for this, like a really fine gauge solderable magnet wire. That would probably work really well for this. I've never tried that for this particular mod, but I think I did that with like a PS2 mod chip one time, and it seemed to work out well. So now you do have options here. You could solder to the group of vias over here. There is a pin out for that on the Wii, the GC Video Wii section of the GitHub, but I've never done that personally, and because you need really fine gauge wire, like really fine gauge wire to do that, like I'm guessing like 32 or 34 gauge, and I just don't have it. So okay, that's one. Now I'm gonna cut a little bit of slack on these wires, because you never know. So I'm going to give myself just a little bit of slack to work with. And then we're just going to move on to the next one. Whoop. I was afraid of that. Trying to do this, by eye, by naked eye, and it is a bit of a challenge. Okay, so the next one is M. That is actually the next one over. So we still have one more to solder in this little group here. So we need to make sure that we got these pressed as far over as we can so that we can get to that last pin there. Same drill here, we're gonna rotate around so a little bit easier for me to see. Get the tweezers in there. Get that last bit soldered. Make sure we got that soldering iron real clean. Not a bunch of extra solder on it. We don't want to bridge anything at this point. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and tack down. I've got a couple of little pads, little cancellations to tack down this board to a couple of components, which keeps it in place a little bit better, so it's not moving around all over the place on me. So, but they keep everything together. Alright. That one is M. You know, M, which is 54 megahertz, it's the clock signal here. You can also get it from this pad here, so if you don't want to solder to that little pin there, you really don't have to. I just did it because I'm a champion. I did it because it's hard mode. No real reason. There you go. Yep, that's called a cold joint right there. Let's add a little extra flux. There's still residual flux from the initial soldering. The initial prepping for the soldering, but I guess that's not enough. Alright, let's try soldering that again. That is still a cold joint. Let me add a little extra solder to this wire. It is, I guess, not tinned well enough. Okay, one more try. One more. If we don't get it this time, then I quit modding entirely. I feel like that's the only reasonable solution. If I fail that miserably, that many times. Okay, we got it. It was strong this time. Alright. That's clock select, so that's going to come over here. Is that actually strong? Yeah, it is. It's bending on the wire, not the joint. Okay. So I was worried I was going to have to quit modding there. Actually gonna go ahead and pre-tin the pads on the board. But it would help if I was using solder, not wire. Guess that would make more sense, wouldn't it? Okay, audio is pretty straightforward. It's just starting from the pin 31 up here. It's so pin 31, and then it's pin 29, and then it's pin 27. Alright, so I gotta double check under the microscope as always. Trust but verify. Everything looks solid. Try to gently clean this area up just a little bit there. Alright, so now all we have to do is connect the dots. That looks done to me. So as you can see, it's not the easiest install in the world, but it's not impossible. And see, I did that with no magnification. I mean, of course I'm using the microscope to double check my work, but the actual work was done just by, you know, naked eye. And I have good vision, but still, you know, it can be done. And we call it success. Okay, so soldering is done. Well, the main portion of the soldering is done. Now there are a couple other things we need to do. So I've cut a nice thin little strip of ribbon cable here, and the ribbon cable is going to connect to two halves. So it's going to connect this little board here to the main board. So we're going to go ahead and attach that, and that board carries the infrared signal wire, the wire for the infrared switch, and it also carries 3.3 volts and ground for powering the whole system, and that all comes off of the AV connector, which is actually pretty convenient if you ask me. It's a lot of functionality in one. Probably if I sell kits of this, I would pre-solder the ribbon cable to the two halves. That way you don't have to mess with it, because it is such a short run. It's kind of a pain to do in place. So that's ready to go. Let's go ahead and tin the pads for the infrared board. And I'm going to solder the infrared board in the air. I'm not going to do that in place because I already know that I cut this cable ever so slightly too long, which means that if I try to solder it in place, it's going to be a major pain. But if I do it up in the air and then I fold it down into place, see, there's a little crease in the cable, but you know, makes the connection just fine. Alright, and to solder this in place, all you have to do is add a little solder to the anchor right here. One of the other things that this board does is it sets the Wii's component cable detect pins, sets them as always detecting component 480p compatible cable, which is important because that's how you get 480p functionality. If the Wii doesn't detect a 480p compatible cable, then it won't work. You can still turn off 480p if you need. I think there are some Wii games that don't even support 480p, which is weird to me, but hey, it is what it is. Alright, and then the last thing is the actual HDMI board, which goes over here. And what you want to do is just kind of get it as flat as you can. And you're going to add some solder. I like to add solder to just one pin here on the USB connector, and then adjust the position of the board until the HDMI port is totally squared up with the rest of the board, so it's not going out at an angle. Then you just want to get that in place, and then your next objective would be to hit these big anchors, and you want to make sure that the HDMI port is pressed down as much as you can get it. So clean that off as well. Okay, that looks good. Last thing we need to do is solder the pad wire. I'm going to go ahead and remove this from the vise. So the pad wire is going to go over here to test point 27. That's the GameCube controller port 1. And that's going to run up here to this pad that is labeled tab. So that's more or less what the installation should look like. Now the last thing to do is to attach the ribbon cable that's going to be connecting the HDMI QSB board to the main board. And that is just a 20-pin 0.5 millimeter, I think, pitch cable. This one's a little bit long. These are the ones I use for GC HDMI and GC dual installations. It's a little bit long, but it works. You just gotta fold it around until you can get the connectors both facing the correct way and plugged in, and you're pretty much good to go at that point. So that's basically what it's going to look like, and then I'll just add a little bit of electrical tape to make this look pretty. There you go. Alright, so now it's ready to go. Let's go ahead and fire it up. Now keep in mind, this is the first time I'm testing this particular revision. Previous revisions have been tested and working, so I have no reason to believe this one won't. But it is a new revision, and several things changed, so if we have any problems, that's part of what we're trying to figure out here today. Go ahead and plug in the HDMI connector. Okay. Let's get our power supply ready. Get ourselves switched over to game capture. And, plug in a sensor bar. This Wii remote is not synced. I thought this Wii remote would be synced, but it's not. Okay. Well, we got something there briefly. Let's. Okay, we're getting a little something.
1 hour later.
Welcome back, everyone. This is just going to be a quick update on what I figured out the problem was with the design of the new version of the board. Well, okay, there's still some unresolved questions. For example, I still don't know why the push button and the infrared functionality is not working. Still haven't figured that one out yet. But importantly, the reason we weren't getting video on the capture card is very simple. It's because in the build materials for this board, I actually had a couple of resistors values swapped on the HDMI QSB. So I'm going to go ahead and correct that. So by the time that this, like the actual video here, is uploaded, actually, I'll do it right now. I'm correcting it as we speak. I am pulling it up and correcting it right now. So the let's see here. So R5 and R6 were swapped around. And essentially, with that being the case, there we go. Okay, so that's been updated. So if you do build this design from Osh Park, the BOM that is located on there that explains what to buy, parts-wise, is now up to date and has the parts in the correct locations. So because the resistors were not set up properly, the pin on the HDMI cable that basically signals the television that something's hooked up to it was not connected. Was not getting the correct voltage, so it didn't connect. It didn't detect that there was actually a video source. So I swapped those around, and that fixed it. And so the BOM is updated now, so that shouldn't be a problem now. Okay, now the other problem being the infrared receiver. I still don't know about that one.
A few moments later.
Hey, welcome back one more time. One more time. So, infrared is working now too. And by working now, I mean it was always working, but I didn't read the documentation on how to actually use it. So, turns out you have to hold down the button until you get this menu right here. You can't just simply press the button. I know it's stupid. I should have read the documentation on how it works, but so I've got an OSSC. I got a remote, one of these Chung Hop learning remotes, and it's set up for an OSSC, which is the correct protocol for the GC Video. So we're just going to program up the buttons. Okay, and now we can enter into the OSD from here and change settings and do all that good stuff. So let's see, let's say we wanted to turn enhanced DVI mode off, and we lost audio. We can mute it. You know, there's all kinds of stuff you can do. And you can store your settings. So once you get everything, let's say, let's see, OSD settings. We could turn the transparency up. We could turn the tint. Yeah, that looks nice, right? Maybe we could crank up the red. Turn down the blue. Oh yeah. Oh, I don't even know what color that is now. It looks like Kapton tape. So that's about it. Yeah, that's gonna be my settings from now on. Yeah, looks awesome. So yeah, sorry to, have split this up by 3 different videos, but just took a little bit of me being an idiot, and here we are. So at this point, yeah, the mod is fully functional, which means that now I can safely recommend it for anybody, and that also means I can conveniently put a listing on my store. So if you want a Wii HDMI installed, it's a lot cheaper than a Wii Dual. I don't know how much it's going to cost yet, but I can tell you already it's going to be a lot cheaper than a Wii Dual, because I believe those are like $120 just for the board, not to mention installation. And I can tell you right now, cost to manufacture these boards, pretty cheap. So it's not really going to be in the same ballpark, I don't think, as the Wii Dual. So anyway, that's about it for the technical side of things. Let's go ahead and install this back into the casing, and I'll show you how that works. I'll tell you straight up, here's what I do. I don't install the metal shield back in there. It's not needed, and it gets in the way of some stuff. You'd have to do a lot of cutting on the metal shield, and I see no point in doing that, so I just don't even install it. I just put the board straight back in. Now there's a couple things that need to be done to get this board to fit properly. One, There's a couple of little pieces of plastic needing to be cut down here where the HDMI port is. I don't know if you can see that. Let's see if I can get the camera zoomed into that. There's this little piece of plastic right here that's interfering with the flat flex connector. At some point I'll probably reduce the pin count on that flat flex connector to bring it more in line with like the way the GC Dual, the Wii Dual is, and then it won't cross over into this area where it's in the way. But as of this revision, we're still using a 20 pin flex cable because it's what I have a bunch of. So basically all you have to do is the spot that interferes with is right here where the USB ports come up. It's this little plastic piece right here. So you just take where the screw post is there, and you just snip, and then snip, and that's gone. And then there's this little peg here that you have to snip off as well. Once those are removed, then the HDMI port will slide all the way down, and then you'll have to cut a space for the HDMI port to come through the casing as well. So you can see now, maybe. Come on. Actually, I think this is too close for my camera's focusing distance. So you can see the HDMI port's in there, but the top of it is being impeded by the plastic here. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a hobby knife and you're going to make a marking at the edge of the HDMI connector on both sides. To indicate the maximum width of the HDMI port, and then you're going to, it's actually really convenient in here, there's a little ledge on the plastic right here, and you're just going to shave the plastic down until you get to that ledge. So you're going to take your hobby knife and you're going to go, let's see here, take your hobby knife, and where you marked it out, you're just going to cut down. Alright, and then you're just going to take and cut sideways from one end to the other. Remove some material. Then you'll take another cut, remove a little bit more, until it's flush with that ledge. And then you'll repeat it going back the other direction. And now, you have a little cutout here that once you put the HDMI connector back on, now you can see you can actually fit the HDMI connector in there because it's no longer being cut off. Now the top half of the case, we're going to do that real quick too. So you can see come on camera. You can see that the top half of the case cuts off almost the entire HDMI port. So you need to trim out. What you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and mark the position again. then you're gonna first, there's a little lip here of plastic that slots into the other half of this casing. So you're gonna trim that portion where you marked it first. And you are gonna have to go deeper than that, so that's not the whole install. Be nice if it was. Okay, so that portion of that lip has been trimmed out, as you can see, and then that, we'll use that to reference how much more we need to trim. So you see you have like 2/3 of the HDMI connector exposed at this point. Actually, that's a lie. You have about half of the HDMI connector exposed at this point. So you're going to mark again where the extremes of the HDMI connector are. And then for this part, it's a little sketch, to be honest. Not gonna lie. You just kind of gotta eyeball it, which is not ideal. But you get everything positioned up. And I would say right about here. That's too close. So you're gonna look at this and let's see here. Yeah, I would say right about here is good. So if we took some calipers, let's take some calipers. Give me just a second. Here we go. So we got some calipers. So if we say that the HDMI connector, the bottom of it comes to here. So that's 1.64 millimeters. And the overall height of the HDMI connector is 3.27 millimeters. So 1.64 minus 3.27, I mean 3.27 minus 1.64, let's see what that comes out to. That's 1.63 millimeters. So we're going to dial our calipers into, we'll just go for 1.65. Should give us a little bit of room. Okay, 1.65 millimeters locked in. So now we're going to take the calipers and we're just going to scratch in our measurement. So I have made a scratch mark for my measurement, and this may be too small. This may well be too conservative. Don't break your hobby knife. I don't know how that happened, but be careful with that. I wonder where that blade went. Sure hope I don't step on it later. Okay, well, crap, guy, dang. Let's get my other one. This one's a little bit bigger. But it can serve the same function. Okay, well that's not very straight. That kind of got messed up because of the excitement we had there. Grab my file. Try to just flatten this out a little bit. I would not expect that your hobby knife goes flying across the room in most installations. Alright, let's put this back together and we'll see how it fits now. So, there you go. That needs more. That needs more. That actually needs more. More filing. Not deep enough. Let's try again. See where we're at now. Almost there. Just shy of there. Let's see. Yeah, it's just a little too tight. Let's file it just a little bit more. That's probably going to be it right there. Yep, I think that's it. Yep. It fits. All right. So, we're done cutting. Let's start actually putting some screws. Well, that's pretty much done. Let's go ahead and pop in an HDMI cable and fire it up one more time to demonstrate that after everything's packed up and ready to go, everything's still working. The infrared remote is supposed to work through the casing. That reminds me. You're supposed to drill a hole. I forgot about that. You're supposed to drill a hole for the button so that if you need to press and hold it later, you can. That hole would be... Let's see here. I have another example of this board somewhere. Okay, the hole that you need to drill would be somewhere in the neighborhood of like... Well, hold on a second. So this would be it. So the hole needs to be like somewhere around like right here. I'm not gonna drill that hole right now. I'm gonna do some measurements and do it properly, but you would have ideally done it whenever the case was still open. But I didn't, so there you go. Alright, so everything's plugged up. Let's get the sensor bar plugged in. Let's get a controller ready. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Okay. See if the remote still works. Hey, the remote does work. Straight through the plastic. No troubles there. Yeah, so I can just... Doesn't matter where it's at. Well, that's pretty cool. There you go. That's a Wii Video HDMI, DVI, I mean. Wii Video DVI version 2.4C. I'll be compiling new firmware versions as they come out as well. So if you build one of these or install one of these, I'll keep the firmware up to date on my website for this. And if you want me to install one, then of course I'll always have it up to date with the newest firmware whenever you get it installed. And that's about it. So I appreciate you watching these videos, and you know, with prototypes, there's always the chance that we'll run into problems. So, you know, thanks for kind of hanging with me throughout this process, and we figured out what was wrong with everything, and that it wasn't actually that big of a deal. Just some labeling errors and then some stupidity on my part. So, but we've got a good design here that is going to be available for anybody who needs an HDMI solution for the Wii, but doesn't necessarily want to go to the full extent of getting the Wii Dual and you know, going to the expense of that. If you don't need the analog functions of it, I mean, this is going to be a more affordable option. I haven't set pricing yet. I haven't officially created a listing for this yet, because this, of course, is a prototype, so I've got some more testing I need to do with it. But once I get to that point, you guys will definitely know about it, and it'll be available on the website. So, thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.